I think there are a couple of challenges. We talked about in the conference how a lot of missions seem to be protracted and really stay on the ground for a long time. And so what that points to is the challenge of getting something done early on in the mission's sort of life cycle when there is this window of opportunity. And so another issue related to that we talk about is the appropriate sequencing of interventions and mandates. And I think there's a lot of work to be done in really understanding what each context requires here. Another issue is, and this links to sort of my work with DPKO, which is protection of civilians, I think more can be done to really link our work at the political level with the work that's done at the operational level, because political dialogue and sort of leverage on political actors is required to create sort of the space for people to achieve objectives on the ground. And so there's a need for a realignment of those two levels of engagement, the political or strategic and operational. Yeah, I mean, DRC is a complex context, and as we know, the conflict there has been, interlinked with, what's happening in neighboring countries. I think it goes back to my earlier point about the importance of political engagement, assuming that we can resolve things by troops moving around in eastern DRC, I think is a bit optimistic. And so where the emphasis really ought to be is on the political process. And unfortunately, I guess that has suffered some setbacks recently. And so an important point in I guess DRC's history is elections, and so the importance of that happening, and maybe this is something that has come up in the conference as well. One thing is what can be achieved within the framework of the mission, but member states independently of the mission also have leverage, and maybe ought to think about how to apply that in support of peacekeepers that they have decided to deploy. Yeah. So, one thing, when I was at the policy department of DPKO looking at protection of civilians, what is apparent is that the things that are reported on POC are indeed the so-called failures, right? And it's often the military component that is pointed at for quote-unquote failing to protect civilians. And indeed, when lives are lost, this is not what we're there to observe or experience, right? We're supposed to prevent that from happening. But I think that's actually the essence of it all, prevent. And so in the POC policy that is what is supposed to inform how the mandate is implemented, there is indeed, there are other types of engagements beyond use of force, beyond deploying the military to interposition, and those concern really building a protective environment and also engaging in dialogue and mediation. And so I think missions, be it in the DRC or elsewhere, can do a lot more to think about and to strengthen their work in these areas, and this includes the military. We talked as well about in the conference today about how the military and civilian components in missions, or the uniform components and civilian components, ought to work together throughout this process of understanding and analysis gathering and patrolling, analysis and implementing of the mandate. And so I think with that we'll see much more successes. And we talked about CAR, Central African Republic, where I spent some time, and I think at least there, what I've seen is some really good experiences of that work happening jointly between the military and the civilian component, and really seeing each other as partners and indispensable partners in successfully protecting civilians.